Yes, that is not anything wrong with your sound system, nor is anything wrong with this particular video and recording. The snippet you just heard is one of the very many differences in the Resident Evil soundtrack that was brought over in the new Director's Cut version, which was released 1 year after the original release of Resident Evil. Resident Evil Director's Cut includes additional modes as well as some changes made to Resident Evil 1 year after the original was released due to the fact that Resident Evil 2, or Biohazard 2 in this particular case, hasn't been released as of yet. And the time itself was actually a little bit uncertain of when it was going to be released. So a new Director's Cut was actually released with showing progress of the Resident Evil 2 demo that was incorporated into the American version. As you're seeing here, you've got two differences of the same, which is Resident Evil Director's Cut, released in North America, as well as the Japanese version. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at each of these, kind of do some comparisons with them, hopefully it shouldn't take too long, and just see what the box art looks like, the marketing, as well as the same type of analysis we've done with the last few versions of Resident Evil. This should be a surefire way to see some differences and maybe some things we haven't, known from or learned in the past when playing these wonderful titles. So we're going to dig in with the first one to start, which is Resident Evil Director's Cut. And of course, if you all are familiar with the future versions, this includes not the DualShock version. DualShock wasn't really kind of supported yet when it comes to this. In the front, you can see the same Richard Atkin character, stressed, adrenaline, and fearful of the future in his eyes, just the same way, with the same looking Photoshop machine gun / shotgun / rifle that we discussed in the past. The difference here, though, is it's zoomed up more towards his face and his upper area with a orange and black background, which I can only surmise is kind of the outline of the mountains or maybe the forest, with the Resident Evil Director's Cut text on there with a white and a little bit of a, black drop shadow in here to kind of make it pop. Of course, this also includes an interactive demo of Resident Evil 2 that is incorporated in here with this particular version. And yes, to make note of this though, it is Resident Evil 2, not Resident Evil 1.5 that many have thought in the beginning was included with this version. So on the back of it, it's got more highlights. In this particular case, the Face Your Fears is shown also in, smaller lettering with, of course, the best PlayStation game overall quote by PlayStation.com as a consumer choice award. This has two screenshots of the PlayStation 1 release of Resident Evil, I assume Director's Cut in this particular case, as well as a screenshot of the Resident Evil 2 demo that's also included, with the highlight and outline and silhouette of the first zombie in concept form that we have grown to know. Face your fears in the ultimate experience of suspense and terror. Bloodthirsty zombies, mutant beasts, monsters, serpents, untold mysteries lurk in around every corner. The nightmare lives in the award-winning game of survival horror, now uncut and uncensored. Get ready as fear takes you to the next level. The exclusive interactive demo of Resident Evil 2 will push you completely over the edge. An enhanced release of the #1 terrifying classic, the complete uncut and uncensored Resident Evil Cinemas, which is somewhat misleading, and we'll get to that in just a second. New camera angles and character graphics, 3 action-packed difficulty levels, easy, original, or range modes of play. Of course, with the mature animated blood and gore, violence, and realistic blood and gore kind of outlines here. Barcode, 1 player, and of course the memory card 1 block that's highlighted here. And then as we open, we see the Resident Evil Director's Cut CD. Very much black right now, and it has a red box with Director's Cut with the same type of popping text that's in the front, with a back inlay of the famous zombie that we all known throughout these particular releases. Next, we have the manual that's also included on the right with this double slotted disc cartridge that also has the Resident Evil 2 demo, which looks really cool with that iconic eye. In this case, it looks a little bit more evolved and deformed. And then also has what I would say is the Resident Evil 2 or Biohazard 2 illustrations of the zombie peering around the corner, scratching the wall or whatever material that he's peering around. All right, let's dig into the manual while we're here. Of course, as we've looked at it here, this is very similar to what it was in the first one. We do have another special message from Capcom Entertainment in this particular one. It actually says just about the same thing as the first one, except that it states that this is the uncut version of the Consumer's Choice Best PlayStation Game overall, and represents a new dawn in video gaming, taking a major step in bridging the gap between games, motion pictures, and reality. We at Capcom Entertainment are proud to bring you this thrilling new addition to your video game library. What's interesting too is with this particular sentence and statement, they continue to highlight that this is a journey into the deepest corners of the macabre and the mysterious, just like they did in the first one. So it almost looks like they made just slight tweaks of the existing one to kind of not reinvent the wheel. And then the dossier's got a lot of the stuff we've already seen before, except now it has a Resident Evil 2 preview. It does have stars, bios, and even has merchandise and warranty. So we're going to dig through each real quick. This is very similar to the first one with the mission setup, as well as highlighting all of the buttons that are used to basically play the game and all the different actions that are performed. Special controls are now highlighted a little bit more in this version as opposed to the first one. Now remember, when we looked at the first one, the Japanese version actually highlighted the special controls a little bit more than the American version. Highlight the same weapons, which is the combat knife, 9mm handgun, and the shotgun. The Mission Raccoon Forest, which is what we've seen in the first one as well, is highlighted here very similarly. And I don't really see a whole lot of differences other than a little bit more graphics, the top secret logo at the bottom, the nice box outline, and it still highlights all the different things of the Alpha and Bravo team, such as Jill Valentine being a machine expert, which I still can't believe, as well as the situation and everything from start to finish. Starting a mission, which highlights new game and load game, and it indicates you can take command of either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. It talks about saving, reset game, saving, loading, and the loading portion of, basically using your memory card. The status screen we've seen before, which has the items use, equip, and check. This, of course, is just in black and white and not colored, just like we saw in the past. What's interesting is in this, it looks like someone added a little additional here with the history of this particular version that I own, because it actually highlights here that if you want to actually have double the ammo in advanced mode, you can actually press and hold right until advanced changes color on the beginning, and that is actually very true. This one just looks like whoever owned this before wanted to make sure they wrote out everything on the warranty card just to make sure they can go back to it, which is kind of unique because a lot of folks, from what I'm aware of, don't really use the insert or manual. We continue to go further, and it talks about the map file, radio, buttons that we've come to know from the last few videos that we've seen and what their functions are, as well as the item box. This also kind of continues to go further and talk about all the different ways that you can use the item box and ways to exchange it, which is a little bit more detailed than they did in the previous, as well as option modes. And then, of course, this is the new edition, which is going to be the Resident Evil 2 preview. And this just highlights the title and what you're going to see with the different modes that you can select, which is new game or sound that you can change to stereo or mono, depending on your setup. Now, they've changed this just a little bit so that the Stars BIOS alpha team is not taking up as nearly as much pages. As you can see, it is taking 3 per page, and it was more of a stacking situation before, but it talks about everything from Barry, Joseph, Chris, Jill, Brad, and Albert. The one thing they also looks like they've removed is kind of a little bit more specifics on their blood type, their age, their weight, and also expertise, even though their expertise is more or less kind of built into the BIOS that they highlight in here. And then, of course, they have the Bravo team separated out. Again, it seems they removed the blood type, the age, as well as their weight. And this is going to be the merchandise section that they included in here as well, which looks like it has a number of t-shirts. If you visit the website at capcom.com, you can order by credit card, or you can call a 900 line for more info. And in this case, they had t-shirts of Resident Evil 2, Mega Man X4, Starfighter Alpha 2, and Super Puzzle Fighter 2. They even highlight all the different strategy guides you can own, the regular and the director's cut of Resident Evil, as well as all of their other stuff. And they even have more that's highlighted here. To be honest, I kind of wish there was a little bit more of these now, because it's hard to actually get proper and confirmed, Capcom related t-shirts, especially for Resident Evil in its original form, which would have been super cool. And then, of course, to the right is the warranty and Resident Evil 2 rebate, which highlighted here that you could get $5 off coupon towards the Resident Evil 2 purchase with the rebate. It even has it right here that you can cut out. So that in itself is the Resident Evil director's cut and the American version. Let's go ahead and take a look at the comparison of this one with the Japanese version, which I can tell you I have never seen a white background with the silhouette of the zombie before of the Japanese version. So if we take a look, let's take a look also on the back and on the sides. The nice thing on the back itself is I'm sure it highlights the same text that we're used to with the disc, PlayStation, and all of the different callouts that we're used to. But what's nice is it actually shows the background of the hallway, of the first hallway you go through, and also has about 3 different screenshots of Resident Evil Director's Cut with Jill in her new form, and also one that looks like Chris Redfield in his new uniform for the Director's Cut version. If we open it up, it looks like the white theme continues, as the actual disc has the same white theme silhouette of the zombie with black text, except for in the front it has the red text with some black text of, Director's Cut. And then it also has the Biohazard 2 Trial Edition, which is also a little bit different, because instead of it white, it actually has it in a blue form, but with the actual eye here. But no other inserts or anything of that nature, other than, of course, the manual, which we'll go through now here in just a minute. But to be honest, I kind of like the simplicity of this one, and kind of the way it's a little bit more impactful with these discs. I kind of in a sense, wish this was kind of more of the mainstream versus the other one, but you never know. There's probably reasons for it. So if we look into the manual, it actually looks very similar as to the manual of the first one. Of course, I can't read their native language, so I can't really tell you exactly what they're saying, other than there's a prologue, Dead or Alive with the status screens we've seen, and also the more of the concept images that we've seen of Resident Evil's main protagonists, Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, which I'm sure's got their specifics on their name, age, probably blood type, and expertise, as well as the Alpha and Bravo team, which is actually a little bit more solid than it was in the previous one. Showing the controls and probably all of the special moves that you can perform, as well as the new game and load game options, which has the original, beginner, and range mode. The original and beginner modes, I believe, are going to be the same Resident Evil 1 version of the game, for the exception of it. If you go with beginner, it's going to be a little bit easier. I believe it's going to increase your health and also double the ammo that you're going to receive. The arrange mode is the new original mode where they actually mix it up. They move the enemies around in different rooms. Makes some of them a little bit easier, a little bit more difficult. And also it includes, I believe, some slight changes to the uniform and definitely the original soundtrack of the first one. This one highlights more of the special moves and looks like it's going to talk about also the item box. It's going to talk about the items that you can perform with this and how you can examine those items in the status screen. And then the map file, radio, and even saving options in this portion of the manual. This, of course, is going to be the Resident Evil 2 exclusive information that talks about the time trial that's included. I say time trial, but it's probably, well, actually it is super time now that I think about it. It generally does like a 15-minute, time, or until you get to the end of the demo, which is not that hard. The interesting differences with this one is that it doesn't show anything or talk about anything related to the main themes of the game, which is something I actually really liked in the original and kind of wish they continued going with that. But I myself am always a big fan of this these original soundtracks, so that's probably a personal preference of mine. And you think that we're done here, but we actually aren't. We actually have two more versions of the same director's cut that we wanted to also kind of outline that I haven't seen a whole lot of. Now, many folks here in the US probably are used to the Resident Evil director's cut with the DualShock analog controller. Now, the Japanese release also had a DualShock director's cut version, which is what you see here, but definitely the front of this is much more different than what it was before. So we're going to go over the director's cut real quick, because this probably only has a difference of DualShock. I bet you it doesn't have much more than that. So as you can see with this one, it's a little bit different because it doesn't have Richard Akin on the front, but is now focused on the zombie and the concept art of what the zombie looks like, with the highlight of DualShock and the greatest hits on the left. The back is very similar. I don't think that has really necessarily changed much. I will say, though, the one major change that you'll be able to see is there is 3 screenshots of this particular version of Resident Evil 1 with no Resident Evil 2 exclusive being shown. I'm pretty sure the reason for this is because I believe Resident Evil 2 was close to, or was released at the time of updating with this version. Because as you can see, the text itself is also a little bit less because they talk a little less about Resident Evil 2. Other than that, it should be pretty much straightforward. Of course, with this one, there's only 1 disc. There's not 2 discs. And I'll just move this out of the way. Which has the same similar look and feel as the other disc. The only difference will be is that it's a little bit simpler in the fact that it doesn't have the red box. The back insert also just kind of shows the Resident Evil 2 concept art itself, and then also shows the manual here on the left, which I need to just be able to take this out without ruining it. And it looks like the same contents as before in the other one. The only difference, of course, will be is that there's no Resident Evil 2 reference and review. And very much so it does. It's very much the same. There's not really any differences that I'm noticing here, except because the fact it's not showing the Resident Evil 2 preview. The pages itself looks like they're a little bit more jumbled and a little bit different. And then, of course, they highlight Resident Evil 2, which is released in this particular case. And it even highlights how Resident Evil 2 supports the DualShock version of the controller. So a little bit more simplistic, a little less stuff that's included with this. Mainly because of the fact there's also no Resident Evil 2 demo with this. So we'll move on to the Japanese release, which is also probably, I assume, very similar. Except, I gotta tell you, I'm a big fan of this. Like, I still like the aesthetic of the first director's cut because it's very simple. This one, however, is interesting because it just looks way different. I never thought I'd ever see a front of Biohazard director's cut with it actually showing the mansion in the main room. The back itself is drastically different, where it actually shows 3 screenshots. It probably has very similar text, which again I can't read them, but it's also, yeah, I would have to say probably that back layout is probably the second floor of the mansion itself. So that is a little bit different. It's a little less, but it doesn't kill me as far as the aesthetic on that one. So let's go ahead and see what differences we have here. Which, this desk is nice because it actually has a lot more information and images on the particular desk that we had in the first one, which was just white, just like on the front. But it looks like they also mimic, I guess, the front itself a lot more closely than it does in the American versions. Which I forgot to highlight that I'm sure this little triangle note here of importance is probably highlighting the fact they have a DualShock version. And the other thing to note too of the major differences between these and the previous Japanese release is that they actually don't have this in survival horror in English anymore, but it looks like a little bit more in the native language. So here's the manual. And then we also have this Biohazard Director's Cut DualShock version Disc 2 Complete Disc. Now, if you don't know what this is, what the Complete Disc is that they included in this version is a way for you to see the actual preview of Resident Evil 2 or Biohazard 2 in this case. And you can see the videos that are for it. But what's also included in here is they actually have the FMVs you can review. You can also get and download save files that have anything and everything in the game that are super complete that you can import and put onto your memory card so that you don't have to start from scratch if you don't want to. It's an interesting thing that they released with this that I've never seen a US version that hasn't included, just the Japanese versions themselves. So it's almost like they basically wanted you to make sure that, hey, at this point, if you've played this game over and over again and you don't want to start fresh and you want to start with everything in the game, you're welcome to do so by using this disc. Which is kind of cool. I never thought I'd ever see that. Contents on this looks very similar, so we'll just kind of dig through it a little faster. Highlights Dead or Alive, the status screen, and still has the same bio screen with the concept art of Chris and Jill. It does also highlight the controls and special actions there. New game, load game modes. This one talks about probably more of the controller related to the DualShock that has the vibration, sounds, and config that you can actually change with, because DualShock had the vibration features. And then, of course, this has the special actions, the item boxes. This is going to have the status screen and items, as well as ways to examine, which continues on with this. Map file and radio that we've seen before, saving with the typewriter. And then this actually highlights the complete disc, which if you see the screenshots there, it's going to show the Magnum revolver that Barry carries around as the intro screen itself. And then you can look at the different Biohazard save datas that you can import onto your memory card, as well as the movies that are included. This includes the Biohazard 2 DualShock version, which is also coming out, which we will talk about in a future video. And then, of course, the Biohazard Symphony that I wish I could have attended, because that would have been wonderful to hear a symphony talking and playing Resident Evil. This looks like more Capcom-related advertisements for their other games. And then, of course, shows Leon and Claire from Resident Evil 2 on this, which I'm sure highlights all the different merchandise that you can get in warranty information. Again, it's still missing the main themes that we saw in the previous versions, which would have been nice to have seen, but I mean, at this point, they're probably talking about bigger and better things, which, you know, Biohazard itself is, and Resident Evil is fantastic, but they were probably looking at trying to promote Resident Evil 2 at this point, which I don't disagree with that. I mean, we all want the new things to do really well, so more versions of Resident Evil can come out at a later time. But yeah, as you can see, that's what the major changes and differences are. So that's it. That's going to be Biohazard 1 in itself, in a nutshell, with all of the Director's Cut and DualShock versions that we have. I am getting a little bit more modes that I want to incorporate and talk about, which is going to be the Resident Evil demos and trials, which is also a little interesting, trying to figure out and investigate in the past to find out where these belonged. But there are some that exist in the world, which I'm getting my hands on, and I will probably show that in the next few videos. But probably what will happen next is I'm going to highlight and show Resident Evil 2 in its very many releases, as Resident Evil 1 was not the only one that had a lot of these releases. But we're going to continue to analyze, look at the different box art, look at the different instructions, and kind of talk about the differences here. One thing I forgot to mention that I will highlight in this particular, director's cut version, was that not only was the Japanese versions really nice because they were uncut, they did show everything part of the MVV. The uncut demos or uncut, raw FMVs or the movies for Resident Evil Director's Cut was actually not uncut at all. It just, instead of it showing in black and white, they showed all the characters in color. But the actual slaying of some of the Alpha team in the beginning, also with Joseph, and kind of picking up the remnants and such of a hand and grasping onto a weapon that was found in the beginning of the FMV, was supposed to be shown as showing it's an actual hand that's been cut off from the person, as well as the dead remains of folks instead of newspaper articles in the beginning was supposed to be also shown in the uncut version. However, Capcom made an interesting choice where they wanted to make sure that it was still cut. I assume it has something to do with the mature ratings, and they didn't want it to go higher than that with these. But it's hard to tell why they would have done that. I know that's something that was been debatable forever, and everyone is still talking about it till this day. But that's what happened. They made the choice to not make it uncut. So really the only new modes and obscure music choices that were added to these was included in this new version, as well as the DualShock, depending on which one you selected. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, if you liked the analysis and you liked looking at these particular versions of Biohazard or these different versions of Biohazard and Resident Evil, feel free to hit me a nice like and a subscribe, and look forward to my next videos as we talk about Resident Evil 2 and a little bit other obscure versions of Resident Evil and Biohazard. Thanks a lot.